welcome to another Round the Clock Bright segment. My name is Kimberly, and today I'm going to be reviewing the 2015 film A Christmas Horror Story. So, I pretty much watched this movie about a week ago, so shortly before Christmas, and it was another film that it was a first time for me. I haven't seen this film, nor have I heard of it. I was recommended to watch it by Josh and asked to give my solo review on it, and I was happily willing. Sorry, I totally froze for a second. I was happily willing to do this review because I love checking out new horror movies that are different, and of course, with it being the month of December and close to the holidays, I was definitely interested in checking out some more Christmas classic horror films, and this one definitely made it on my top 10 classic Christmas horror movies. So just like Better Watch Out, this movie definitely kept me on my toes and on the edge of my seat throughout this whole movie. And it was definitely, in my opinion, not a very predictable film. I mean, that right there sets this film in its own category because, I mean, granted, there has been films that I couldn't quite predict, but ended up being a very horrible film. And this one was not one of them. I give this one definitely a 2 thumbs up, and I definitely recommend watching it if you haven't already. So just a heads up, I will be spoiling a lot of this movie to pretty much go into detail because there's just so much to cover on this film because it pretty much goes everywhere. But in order for me to pretty much break it down, I have to go into details. So, like I said, if you have not seen this movie and you are interested in checking it out, definitely turn this review off. You can go on Shudder. I know it is currently on Shudder. That's where I viewed it. Watch the movie and then come back and check out our review. But if you don't mind a spoiler, continue watching. I will pretty much go into details and break down this movie while also explaining some parts that I liked and that I didn't like. So the 2015 film, A Christmas Horror Story, pretty much opens up to a radio broadcaster. He's pretty much talking about this small town and its history behind it and some of the stuff that went on throughout the years that kind of led up to where they're at now. A lot of them being very tragic stories. So this town has already been built on a very bad rep. This radio broadcaster is also played by none other than William Shatner. So it was definitely interesting to see William Shatner dive into the horror genre. I love seeing actors and actresses who have never played in a horror movie and I've seen them from other genres of films just come right in, and either they blend in very well or horror isn't their strong point. And sometimes it's not because of their acting, but because of the film and the story and plot. But yes, I was definitely really excited to see William Shatner play in this movie. I did sit there and wonder what was going to happen to his character, but I will just say right now, nothing happens to his character. He's nothing more than just somebody who sets up and opens the film with his, I like to call it a narration, but I mean, he's pretty much narrating it through a radio program. And then closes up the film at the end. So that was pretty cool. And then we do get a little bit of a cameo and particular shots later on with him in it. So it's pretty cool. But yes, that's how that movie pretty much opens up. And as you'll start to notice, this film is pretty much revolved around between 3 to 4 different storylines. It's almost like those romance comedy films like Valentine's Day or what was the one? New Year's, where you have a set of characters who have their own story, but they all kind of connect and know each other in one way, shape, or form. But unlike movies like Valentine's Day and New Year's, these stories don't quite particularly end on a very happy note. A lot of them end up ending tragically. Or you do get some that kind of wrap up with a tragic but then a happy moment. So this one's kind of like a horror take on different stories. And I like films like that where you're not just focused on one plot, one story, but you got 3 to 4 things going on, and then, you know, they lead up to suspense because it'll show a particular story, and just as things are getting about to go down, it switches over to a different story, and then you get into that, and then it just keeps flip-flopping back and forth, which I just like that kind of I guess film set where we can kind of see different stories play out before our eyes. I'm going to start talking about each story and what the story brings. So what's kind of cool is that, like I said, it doesn't particularly stay in one plot. So we have different villains, and some are you know, our classic, you know, villains where, you know, you got, oh, that's where I'm looking for, legends. Like, it's almost like Bloody Mary and Candyman, where they're legends, but these are our Christmas legends. Like, we do get Santa Claus. Granted, Santa Claus isn't scary, but he does play a part in this. Which then we have the opposite spectrum of Santa Claus, and that's Krampus. So I was definitely excited to see that they brought Krampus into this, set aside the actual Krampus movie. So it was pretty cool. Then we get like zombie elves, which was kind of, you know, when I heard about it, thought it was kind of silly. Like, okay, we got zombie elves. Is this going to be one of those like cheesy horror films where, you know, we have these little tiny elves running around being zombies? And granted, we do get that. We do get elves running around as zombies, but they're actually pretty one second. They're actually pretty badass zombie elves. So so we get that, and then we get these little creatures, and I can't quite recall what they're called, but it was actually kind of interesting to see this because I can't. It's been like a week, and I can't remember what these little creatures were called, but we get them in the sorry. We get them in this movie, and it was, I am so sorry, my cat is right underneath my stand that I have my phone on, and he was distracting me there for a minute, so sorry if I seem like I kind of paused and lingered a little bit. But like I was saying, so we get these little creatures that are pretty terrifying and cool at the same time, but I just can't for the life of me remember what they're called. We do get some demonic ghosts in this movie, and that pretty much plays out in one story, but it still has its Christmas feel to it because it does set place in a like a Catholic school or some sort of like school that's a church, and the only thing I can think of is like a Catholic school. So you get the Christmas feel because, you know, Christmas, religion. So it all kind of stays in that same category. Um, and yeah, so I mean, we just get all of this kind of jumbled into this movie, but in different storylines. And this is where I'm going to go and talk about each story. So the first story that we get is pretty much this group of friends who are on a Christmas vacation, but the one girl is very deep in her one of her school projects that she has due when they come back from their Christmas vacation, where she pretty much talks about the Catholic school that had a lot of murders behind it throughout the years. And she pretty much, it goes into, you know, where she has to take a video of her, you know, explaining what she found and the story to present to her class. But excuse me. So you got her, I believe her name was Molly. And then you have these two boys who pretty much help her with this project as like her cameramen. And then you have her best friend who actually doesn't stick with this crowd. She ends up helping out for like maybe 5 minutes of that, pretty much that, and she pretty much helps them out, I meant to say. And then she goes on like her vacation or her trip with her family to see her aunts. So then that ends up becoming its own story altogether. But yeah, she's there, and she pretty much gives Molly the key to the school so she can go and pretty much hands-on go into the school and present her project on camera, you know, collect evidence and whatnot, but has to be very secretive about it and can't let nobody know that she has the key and that she's in the school. So that's pretty much all you see of her best friend, besides the fact that we know that she's dating one of the guys in the group, and they share a makeout session that leads to very awkward and uncomfortableness between Molly and the other guy. But yeah, so then her parents pull up, tells her we gotta go. They ended up going to, I guess, her aunt's and stuff. So yeah, so pretty much then Molly and the two guys go up to the school. They sneak in. They have to hide a little bit because there's a teacher still lingering around the school trying to lock up and get ready to go home for their Christmas break. And so they end up getting locked into the school, which is very spooky because, like, you have all these murders and missing people that happened throughout the years in the school, and now you're locked in there, like, oh my gosh. But she continues on going about her project, and later on she ends up getting possessed by a demonic ghost. And I guess her friends don't realize she's possessed. They think she's either joking or there's just something off about her, but I don't think they ever really know that she's been possessed. But like one of the backstories that she talks about on the history of the school is that there was this one girl who ends up getting, I guess can't remember if she got murdered or if she committed suicide, but I mean, I guess she ended up pregnant, and she was telling everybody at the school that she was a virgin that she wasn't supposed to be, she doesn't know how she got pregnant. And of course, everybody at the school doesn't believe her, thinks that she's just making it up because she doesn't want to admit that, she slept with somebody and she got pregnant because she's in a Catholic school, and that is pretty much shunned upon. So I don't know, I'm not sure if she committed suicide, killing both her and the baby, or if she was murdered by some demonic ghost. But either way, that girl dies, and she ends up pretty much haunting the school. And I guess later on, throughout the years, the investigators finds another group of kids dead. One is pretty much crucifixed up on the wall in one of the rooms, and they find his body as they're investigating. And one of the detectives hears noises outside the room. He goes out to investigate. Something happens, which we don't see because it's like off camera. And I guess it was so bad that the detective ends up going, pretty much retires from his job because it was so traumatizing, and he has to seek help. So Molly ends up being possessed, and we come to find out Molly is actually a virgin, which we're thinking, okay, why do we need to know that she's a virgin? It plays a big part in this story because as she's possessed, she tries to, and I'm gonna admit this right now, this story was completely creepy. And once you got to the end of that story, I was like, what the heck did I just watch? But she's possessed, and she tries to seduce her best friend's boyfriend, which was kind of weird because I was like, why? But so she pretty much follows him into another room as the other guy's sleeping next door in the room they were in, and she starts coming on to him. They're kissing, and he pushes her off and says, I'm sorry, but I'm dating your friend pretty much, and I got a girlfriend. And she doesn't like that too much, and of course we don't see what happens, but we come to find out later on that she ended up killing him, which was kind of sad, but she did. But because she couldn't get anything from him, she goes back into the room with the other guy who's sleeping, wakes him up, tells him that she knows that he has a big crush on her, because he does. And they end up doing stuff. And yeah, and then as they're pretty much done doing their stuff, she comes out of being possessed, so she's back to her normal self, and she doesn't know what's going on because as she was possessed, she doesn't know anything, and she realizes that she had lost her virginity to this guy, but she doesn't know whether he came onto her, and she was like, almost like when you're in a drunk state and you do stuff and then you're like, was it him or was it me? So she was completely confused but scared and terrified. And then when they go next door, that's when we see the other guy is dead, and they're totally freaking out. But then she sees the figure of the ghost go by, and that's when she realizes that ghost is the girl that committed suicide or was murdered, either one. And she realizes that girl's goal was to take over another person who was a virgin, which would have been Molly, her body, and because there was a group of guys, get her pregnant. So I'm assuming so she can take over her body and pretty much live the life that got taken from her. And the fact that her baby was gone, she was able to recreate herself through another human. To me, it was completely creepy. And when she realizes this and voices this out loud to that guy, the guy freaks out like, whoa, like she's crazy, in that he thought she was planning this whole time. But then he ends up getting killed and pretty much Molly wanders the school. I'm assuming she never gets out. She just pretty much wanders the school, and she lives there and stays there for the rest of her days, which, man, was that creepy. But that's just one story, and of course it doesn't all just happen to, play out just like that, because you have slices in between with the other stories that we have. But that one was definitely one that made it on the what the heck list. The next story we have is this family. You have the mom, the dad, and the little boy who are on a trip to go pretty much find a Christmas tree. We learn that the dad hasn't been very active in his son and his wife's life for long, but he is now just re-entering, and he wants to celebrate Christmas and make up for all the lost time that they had. And one of them was to go find a really nice Christmas tree that they could cut down, take home, and decorate. And he pretty much, they go to this forest, and as they're walking through the forest, they come upon this area that says "Do not enter." And of course, in any horror movie, if you have a "do not enter" or "do not go in there," what do? They end up going in there, and you're just like, why? But apparently he saw a tree that was more fuller and more bigger than all the rest of the trees that were on the "do not enter" side, and decided, we need to one-up this, and we need to go over and get that really nice Christmas tree. I would have just settled on a little tiny tree on the other side, and, it has still been special. But no. So this family, well, I give the mom credit. She tries to talk the dad out of not going over, but he doesn't listen to her. Him and his son go over, and she's left with, well, I have to tag along too because they're going. So then they end up cutting down their tree. They're heading back to their car. When all of a sudden the little boy wanders off into the forest, which I hate in movies when you have like the little kid who's walking behind mom and dad. Like, why would you be walking behind? Either walk beside or in front. Like, I'm not going to let my kids walk behind me. They're going to be in front of me. And then the fact that they just continue walking for like 5 minutes before they realize, oh, he's not here. Like, what are you doing? But yes, he wanders off, and by the time the parents realize that he's gone, they don't see him. Now they're on a panic rush. Got to find the little boy. At this point, the little boy's hearing noises in the forest. He's freaking out. He's calling for mom and dad, but mom and dad can't hear him, and mom and dad's only for him, but apparently he can't hear him. And then next thing we know, it cuts off, and by the time mom and dad gets to the spot that the boy was standing at, he's no longer there. To their credit, they end up finding this little boy, because as they're going on their search, they find him inside of a tree trunk that has a hole in it, and he comes out pretty much terrified, and we're thinking, oh good, mom and dad found the little boy, everything's good. Nope. This is where the story of the little tiny creatures I was telling you about comes into play, because we find out that this little boy isn't himself, but his body was taken over by one of these little creatures who aren't very nice per se. But of course, mom and dad doesn't realize this. They take him home. They have a nice, lovely dinner, decorate the Christmas tree. Mom and dad puts the little boy down to bed, but this little boy is very creepy because he keeps wandering out of his bed and staring at mom while she's sleeping, or this really, really uncomfortable scene where he's in the bed with mom, and it was just weird. I don't know. This story was interesting, but it wasn't one of my favorites. So yes, you pretty much find out the reason why the dad isn't active or hasn't been active in his son and his wife's lives. He was very abusive because, as you see, when he gets very irritated with his son's behavior and how he's acting, he starts spanking him. The mom goes off, gets mad, which then you realize, like, oh crap, dad's in a lot of trouble because, he just did that, which at that point you're like, well, he doesn't really sound like a nice guy anyways. but yeah, he pretty much ends up getting killed by the creature. We don't see that pretty much until mom comes out, and this is after she realizes, well, actually no, it was before she realizes that there's something off about her son. And, well, she realized earlier on that there's something off, but before she realizes that's not really her son. And she finds her husband, pretty much his hands are cut off, and he is tied up with Christmas lights next to the Christmas tree. And that was very creepy and very unsettling. That's the word I'm looking for. Very unsettling. And then that's when she gets the phone call from this older guy who lives out in that forest with all those creatures. And apparently he is like the only person who can pretty much keep these creatures in check, because he calls her after he saw them walking away from the forest, and pretty much asks her if there's something off about him. He pretty much knows there is, but questions her. And when she does a little research after getting off the phone with him, she realizes that's not her son. So now she has to take her son back to the forest where he came from and try to find her actual son. So that pretty much plays out. It definitely ends on a happier note in the aspect that she does end up finding her son and they go home. It's terrifying because the creatures pretty much kills their dad, but then they still have a happy ending because they find each other. It's weird in its own way, but so that's pretty much the second story that follows. The third one is pretty much that best friend that we saw in the beginning with the group of friends and her family traveling to visit her aunt in another city. And she's a very rich and wealthy woman, and they go up to visit her for the holidays. And this part I was kind of in and out of, like, paying attention, which that's bad. But I kind of like lost some information, but somehow the family gets kicked out of the aunt's house, and I'm assuming it was because the younger brother had messed with something on the aunt's shelf. It was like a little knickknack or a little statue and broke it, and I assume that's why she kicked them out. We later I'll find out the real reason, but in the family's eyes, they were getting kicked out because their son messed with something of importance to this aunt, which, they were thinking, well, we just drove all the way down here for one little tiny hiccup and we just get booted out into nowhere. Comes to find out that the reason that this aunt kicked them out was because, for her own selfish reasons, was because she knew that this family was bad, and that because they were bad, Krampus was going to come and visit them. So she wanted no part in it, so she kicked them out so Krampus could get them and leave her alone. So like I said, for her own selfish reasons. So we pretty much go through that whole family excuse me, getting offed one by one, starting with the younger boy who, oh, who tries to help dad because dad got shot with arrow in his arm and he's bleeding. So the younger brother goes to investigate and gets dragged away by Krampus. And then next it was dad because dad was already bleeding out and dying. Krampus gets him, and so forth and so on. We end up thinking that Krampus saves the girl, the best friend per se. But then we later on find out he didn't, because this girl ends up going back to her aunt's house, asks her why she did that, and then that's when we find out why she really kicked them out, and it wasn't because of her younger brother breaking something, but because she didn't want to be, she didn't want to be taken by Krampus. And then that's when you hear the girl say, "You've been very bad." And it comes to find out it wasn't really the girl, it was Krampus all along. Krampus never died and ends up taking the aunt away, which was karma. That story was a good story. Pretty basic. I mean, so I wouldn't say it was like my favorite, but it was pretty cool. It was karma at its finest and well deserved. The last story, this one was actually kind of interesting, and I really like this one. This is probably my favorite story out of this movie, and it's gonna be the Santa Claus one. The Santa Claus and the zombie elves, because you get a little bit of everything. You get Santa becoming this badass who is fighting off of zombie elves and, pretty much trying to save Christmas at the same time. And then in the end, going head to head with Krampus and duking it out with him. And that was pretty cool. So I'm not going to really get into very fine details. I just kind of was able to sum that all up. But what was so interesting about this is, just as you thought Santa was going to win against Krampus, you come to find out that Santa isn't really Santa, but just your average Santa Claus in the mall that had, I'm assuming, some kind of dementia, because he was going in and out of what was reality and what was fake, and he really thought he was Santa Claus fighting off zombie elves and Krampus. And it kind of flashed back and forth on the scenes where he was in his made up world where he's fighting off these elves, but then in reality he was fighting off workers or customers that were in the mall and killing them and not killing these zombie elves. Or when he had to take down Mrs. Claus because she had got infected and became a zombie herself, but he was actually hurting people and not realizing it. And so when he goes head to head with Krampus, it wasn't really Krampus, it was the store owner of the mall, and he's trying to fight for his life, and he's telling him no, stop. And then that's when he comes out and realizes what he had done. So then as he's trying to make a dash for it, he gets shot down by a whole bunch of cops who had finally made their appearance. And I would have to say it was my favorite because, like I said, you had badass Santa fighting off zombie elves, but I wasn't predicting that ending of that story in the least bit, to think that it was all just made up in a man's mind and he was doing hurtful things to actual people. That was pretty crazy. But yeah, so those are your 4 stories right there. And like I said, each one brought a different take, a different feel. Either you liked the story or you didn't like it, but there was always another story that favorited over the other, but still had its cool aspects. And And yeah, I had no issues with any of the acting. A lot of the actors, aside from William Shatner, I have not noticed in other films, so I'm not sure. They're probably in some films that I've seen and maybe just didn't recognize them or didn't realize that they were in this movie, and I'll probably later on will. But they were really good. I wouldn't say anything bad about the acting. Special effects was really great, especially some of those scenes with the zombies getting, chopped up, and you had the scene with the one elf that spews out blood and it didn't come off as fake or very cartoonish. It was very well planned out. And like I said, this whole story and plot was really good. I have nothing actually bad to say. Besides some of the depth that they went into with some of these stories where I either felt uncomfortable or I was like, whoa. But it's horror. We can go into depth and we can take it to the extreme. Whether it makes us comfortable, it makes us uncomfortable. It is a director who is diving into bringing new content that we haven't seen in other films and making it more suitable for us. And quite honestly, I can't knock it. I mean, so yeah, I mean, that was pretty much my thoughts and my opinions on this. Sorry, I was getting a warning on my phone. But yes, so that was my thoughts and my opinions on the 2015 movie Christmas Horror Story. I again apologize if it sounds like I was rambling or if it sounded like I was pausing here and there. But yes. So so I definitely am going to say this movie will go on my list and will probably be a movie that I watch in the future, especially make it a holiday tradition every year around December. Up there with Krampus and Better Watch Out, you got to add this to your must watch around Christmas time. It'll definitely put you in that spooky Christmas feeling. So yes. So thank you for joining me. Again, we bring out content for you weekly. So if you have any recommendations on some films you would like us to touch up on, leave them in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, definitely subscribe and look out for our next review. And yes, hope you all have a wonderful night and you guys stay spooky and safe and bring in the new year. Bye.